Today we have the joy of celebrating our liturgy, both of the Eucharist and of our beloved daughter's ministry, on Gaudete Sunday. It's beautiful that it's not only the feast of the joy of Advent, but also the feast of Our Lady. How convenient it worked that she decided to bring all things together. And for this reason, the Church celebrates twice in the liturgical year moments of joy, the Gaudete Sunday and the Laetare Sunday, in which we have the symbol of the rose-colored candle, to remind us that our life in the midst of darkness, the joy of God never stops. And I think that's why it's almost appropriate that we see that this date that falls is shy of the darkest day of the year, the 20th of December. For on the 21st of December, we start the beginning of the coming of light more and more, which is coming into the day. And darkness is being vanquished. So the joy we have is the joy that's lived in the midst of the darkness. As it is once said, that in the darkest of nights, it's then when we notice that the stars shine brightest. We don't see the stars when there's light in the sky. It's in the darkness. And the stars tell us that even though the light is not here, they speak to us of a promise of the source of their light. And that is the source that we find in hope. And this is why it's so important on this feast day in Advent to start living our joy of the coming of Christ into our hearts. Sometimes we forget that Advent is so necessary, and we want to jump together for Christmas. But I want you to imagine now what Advent is in the mystery of God's mind. Think of this Advent as the child Jesus who is growing in the womb. How wonderful to think that is, that God desired to embrace every aspect of our humanity. God began as a little blastula of all these cells together. And in this Advent season, we can imagine these cells now coming together to form a tiny body. There are feet that are being formed. Imagine as these days take, each day, those toes are being developed, the heel being developed. These will be the feet one day, which many will come and kiss the feet of Christ. The feet that the woman came, who broke that precious nard, and her tears washed the feet of Jesus and wiped them with her hair. Began in this time of Advent, in the time of silence, small feet, small toes. The feet that were kissed by the Blessed Virgin Mary would one day be kissed by each one of us with our tears and contrition. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the feet of the messenger that brings good joy. Imagine in the womb then, the fingernails of Christ. How beautiful it is. We see even in the womb, when we have ultrasounds, we see the tiny fingers of a child and those fingernails being formed. God desired every single detail of the life of Christ to embrace ours. Tiny little fingers. Imagine in our lives how often we think that God is too busy for us. God is forgetful. Yet God could spend all this time in a womb to creating these fingers. Fingers that would touch and heal. Those fingers one day that would encounter a woman who for many years was hemorrhaging and wanted to touch Christ, but was afraid of being touched by Christ because of uncleanliness. And so she wanted to touch his tassel. But Jesus was not satisfied with just her touching the tassel. He wanted her to experience his own touch. Those hands being formed in the womb were hands being formed to reach out for you and I, to touch us, to let us know that we are his, that no one is outside of his reach. We think in the womb there, that tiny little head being formed there. Still no hair, but eyes. Eyes that do not see, yet are there. Ears that cannot hear, yet are there being formed. A nose is being formed that cannot smell. And can we not imagine in our own lives when we do not feel the presence of Christ? We don't sense him close to us. And yet Christ, who is developing even in the womb, is yearning the same way to experience us, to smell the fragrance of us, to look upon us with eyes of love, to be able to feel us like the woman of Veronica who wiped the face of Jesus, tracing her hands over those nose, those ears, those eyes, being formed in the womb, that we can touch them. All this image then we think of Advent is precisely that waiting not in an empty void, but waiting of something beautiful that's taking place in this gestation period. And just as God delighted in every single aspect of the infant Jesus being formed, from his fingernails to his eyelashes to the little crease in his smile, so too God delighted in us in this Advent, as our interior virtues are being formed and allowing our hearts to be one with him. This is why in the womb of Mary there was great joy. And we hear in that beautiful response here of Mary's response when she says, "My soul magnifies the Lord," because tiny things are taking place. But when seen with this magnanimity of the heart that dwells on the small things, it rejoices truly that God is in the details of our life. How wonderful it is to see how Mary, in her Advent, was carrying a child. And in each one of us, we are living that carrying of the child Jesus being formed in my heart in the virtues of meekness, in the virtues of patience, in the virtues of forbearance, in the virtues of forgiveness. All this is being manifested as a transformation. As the Christ is being brought to gestation, so too my heart is being made into this living image of Christ who is in me. For this reason, then, it is not an empty season, but a very pregnant season, a moment of transformation. On Christmas Day, when Christ was born, it wasn't then that he began to be God. It was every single day in the womb. And the same way in our life. The Christmas Day is not the beginning of Christ in my life, but the revelation of the silence, what he's been doing in my heart, in my prayer, in my stillness, of his virtues and likeness to him that I see in the manifest on the day that I look upon the Christ child and I see myself in him. And in the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.